As I sit here getting ready to start my day, catching up on and reading all of the news that's hitting the cycle, I've come across this article from the New York Times in regards to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The article reads, U.S. will aggressively revoke visas of Chinese students, Rubio says. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the students who will have their visas canceled include people with ties to the Chinese Communist Party and those studying in critical fields. And it made me sit here and just contemplate everything I knew or thought I knew about Marco Rubio before the 2024 election, where President Donald Trump regained control of the presidency and ultimately wound up announcing Marco Rubio as his pick for Secretary of State. I remember at the time thinking, what a horrible pick. Trump, as usual, is going to be a great president with great economic and foreign policy, but once again will also be making the same old mistakes over again, picking all the wrong people around him. And how could you blame me? When I thought of Marco Rubio back in November, December, and January, I thought of this.
Policy question for you, sir.
Let's see if he answers it.
I will. Don't worry about it, Marco. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, little Marco. I will.
All right, well, let's hear Big Don. Donald.
Don't worry about it, Don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen.
We all remember that infamous moment from over 9 years ago now, little Marco. But as it would turn out after watching so far everything Marco Rubio has done for this country as Secretary of State, I've come to the conclusion that, to be honest with you, I was selling Marco Rubio completely short. It's not often that I'm wrong, but when it comes to Marco Rubio, I was completely wrong. I'm going to showcase and explain why Marco Rubio has great presidential potential right here, right now on American Advocates. When it comes to Marco Rubio and President Donald Trump's relationship, we went from this fiery debate moment 9 years ago to this ridiculous, cheesy-looking moment right here. Where the two of them just seem to get along really well, and they seem to have an incredibly strong working relationship. In all honesty, everything I've read and everything I've seen as President Donald Trump goes live during his cabinet meetings seems to indicate that President Donald Trump actually, in fact, really respects Marco Rubio and perhaps trusts him more than he trusts most people, even others in his cabinet. These feelings towards Marco Rubio are not even just shared by President Donald Trump, his current administration, or even the Republican Party. But when Trump picked Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State, he wound up being unanimously confirmed as Secretary of State, becoming the first member of the second Trump cabinet in a 99-0 yes confirmation vote. That means all of the sitting Senate Democrats also voted in favor of Marco Rubio becoming Secretary of State. And the only reason why it wasn't a 100-0 yes vote was because that missing one vote was actually from J.D. Vance, who was obviously stepping down to become vice president, so he was absent at the time. But it would have been a 100-0 vote. And in fact, the 99-0 vote is actually a first-of-its-kind historic precedent set. In the words of President Donald Trump himself, when he was recalling this moment in the Senate, he said, "I don't know if that's an amazing thing or if I should be deeply concerned," which is true because if the Democrats like you, that's not always a good thing. However, in the case of Marco Rubio, it seems to be that he might just be one of those guys that's respected by everyone and could actually serve as a future unifying force for this nation as a result. And despite all the doubts that I had about Marco Rubio being Secretary of State going into this 2025 Trump administration, Marco Rubio quickly wound up changing my minds, most notably by acting very quickly to do one of the things that President Donald Trump promised during his campaign run, as well as doing something that just flat out helps make America a much safer place to live. That being, of course, designating cartels and gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. This designation by Marco Rubio as Secretary of State wound up being one of the key steps to President Donald Trump being able to deport so many illegal immigrants out of this country and secure the border to a 99.999% secure rate, with so few illegal immigrant crossings now happening every month that it's historic. This also allowed President Donald Trump to enact the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, at least for a long enough period of time, where President Donald Trump was able to clear out tons of illegal immigrants who did not belong in this country, who had violent criminal pasts. And I remember at the time when Marco Rubio got this done, it started to shift my opinion on him slightly. I remember thinking maybe he's not so bad after all. But Marco Rubio continued to impress me as time went on. Because the next target that Marco Rubio wound up setting his sights on was U.S. aid, in combination with Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency looking for bloat, fraud, and corruption. Marco Rubio turned to U.S. aid and realized it was full of nonsense. Rubio says 83% of U.S. aid programs are terminated after a 6-week purge. This did wonders to save taxpayer money from going towards incredibly stupid stuff like transgender studies on mice in other countries and foreign Sesame Street productions in the Middle East, as well as just a whole list of other things. You can see all of the USAID nonsense on the Department of Government Efficiency website. They list it there for everyone to see. But it wound up turning out to be something phenomenal that Marco Rubio did, and I think he wound up ultimately cutting over 90% total, if I remember right, of all USAID foreign funding and projects because it was just all a bunch of nonsense. And again, when this happened, combined with the fact that he designated cartels as foreign terrorist groups, he really started winning me over, but it kept getting better from there. You see, a lot of conservatives have grown to become very sick and tired of hearing about the Ukraine-Russia war. Yes, we understand it's a devastating conflict and it's a bloody war with an extremely sad amount of soldiers dying on both sides. We get it. But after Vladimir Zelensky's disrespectful stunt in the Oval Office with President Donald Trump on live television, where he showcased his incredibly ungrateful demeanor and attitude towards everything that America has done for him in Ukraine, quite honestly, a lot of Republicans just weren't feeling the war anymore. And still, to this day, it seems to be an unresolved conflict overall. And truthfully, it's not a war that Trump's responsible for at all. Marco Rubio was out there once again speaking his mind and subsequently speaking the mind of many Americans as well when he said this.
If it's not possible, if we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done. You know, we'll do what we can on the margins. We'll be ready to help whenever you're ready to have peace. But we're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
And in all honesty, fast forwarding just over a month from when he said that, I would like to think and hope that they're reanalyzing that situation right now. Even though the Ukraine mineral rights deal has been signed with America, they need to take a look and re-examine that conflict going on over there and decide really just how much we want to be dealing with that. But when it comes to tension and conflict and foreign affairs, Marco Rubio has played a giant part in the Trump administration in helping President Donald Trump make deals and negotiate and obtain more peace across the globe when it comes to countries like, quite honestly, Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Pakistan, and a whole host of other countries. Marco Rubio has had a hand in everything, even when it came to President Donald Trump's tour in the Middle East, where President Donald Trump has managed to obtain $5 trillion in pledged investments from that region. And now, with all of this being said, it's fair to say that Marco Rubio has completely won me over as a politician. But again, he continues to do better and better work. One of the other things I'm a massive fan on is Marco Rubio's strict stance when it comes to foreign visas, because these have been being abused under previous administrations now and taken advantage of severely. We've been welcoming in all the wrong people into this nation, people who hate America, people who come here to strictly benefit from our American money, our American college education system, as well as our freedoms and everything else that comes with just being allowed to exist in America. These visas are for people who are supposed to love the idea of America and want to come here to create a better life. But under administrations like the Joe Biden administration, so many of the wrong people were just welcomed into our country and given extensions on their stays on top of that. This article's from a while ago now, but Marco Rubio says 300 student visas have been revoked, including detentions and Tufts, Columbia, and more. And now, I bet you that number is significantly higher because Marco Rubio has done nothing but go on to continue to find and revoke student visas from students who just don't belong here and despise America.
You should expect more visas will be revoked as we identify people that we should never have allowed in because they lied to us. When they said they were coming here to be students, they didn't say they were coming here to occupy university buildings and vandalize them and tear them apart and have campuses hostage. If they had told us that, we would never have given them a student visa.
In fact, there are hearings going on this very week that Marco Rubio has been attending and answering questions at because it's outraged a lot of the Democrats in the Democrat Party. Take a look at this clip right here of how Marco Rubio is put on blast and under fire by Representative Pramila Jayapal on these student visas being revoked and on students being taken by ICE agents and deported out of this country for grandstanding against America and writing op-eds and writing articles that just are anti-American and pro-terrorist, mind you.
Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech?
Constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr. Secretary,
while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time.
And what a great reminder that honestly is when it comes to Congress and Senate in general for politicians. They should exclusively only be American-born citizens. Now that's a topic for a different day, but I am sick and tired of seeing these politicians who weren't born in America taking a stand against America and American first policies. It's just so annoying to watch them be talked over by these idiotic Democrat politicians who are just there to spread their narrative. They're not actually there for the answers to the questions that they're asking. It's all just a show to them. So let me show you this clip real fast. This is Marco Rubio's true take on the student visa policy, uninterrupted.
When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, as on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student, and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out.
And I absolutely love that. I think that's phenomenal, and I think that's just common sense policy, something that's been missing over the last 5 years, finally being re-implemented under the Trump administration and under sensible, smart people like the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. And finally, when it comes to keeping America safe and putting America first, Marco Rubio has done a phenomenal job once again in just removing people and in savagely dealing with questions that are obvious setups by the media. I love this scenario that happened when it came to Trump's live cabinet meeting where Marco Rubio was asked about Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia, because they just can't give that topic up.
Secretary Rubio, can I ask you a question? You brought up El Salvador in your remarks. Have you been in touch with El Salvador about returning Abrego Garcia? Has a formal request from this administration been made?
Well, I would never tell you that. And you know who else I'll never tell? A judge. Because the conduct of our foreign policy belongs to the President of the United States and the executive branch, not some judge. So we will conduct foreign policy appropriately if we need to. But I'll never discuss it. And no one will ever make us discuss it because that's how foreign policy works.
And see, this is what America needs. America needs no-nonsense politicians. It's why we like people like Tom Homan. It's why we like people and voted for a president like President Donald Trump. J.D. Vance has displayed some of these traits as well, and Marco Rubio is becoming quite the savage himself. It's an amazing administration and cabinet to watch work, and Marco Rubio, like I said, is not someone to sleep on. 2028 is a little ways away, and there's not too much of a reason to dwell on the 2028 presidential election so far, but you can't help but wonder what that landscape's going to look like once President Donald Trump is done, and it's his second term, so he's completely done. I've often thought that J.D. Vance has a great shot of becoming president in 2028, and now taking a look at it, I'd say Marco Rubio does too. In fact, I think the most ideal scenario would be a J.D. Vance for president and Marco Rubio for vice president in 2028. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Has Marco Rubio pleasantly surprised you? Were you always on his side and thought he was a good pick from the beginning? Or are you still unsure about him? Let me know what you think. Subscribe to this channel for more. And give this video a like to wish Marco Rubio a belated happy birthday, because apparently his birthday was yesterday. So happy birthday, Marco Rubio.